Hey guys, Rob, can you listen?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I think we have a lot of people here already. The goal of this webinar is to present a little bit about the SOC CMM. What features does it have? How it contributes to your organization and to your SOC's operation, right? And in the end, we're going to discuss a little bit about the benefits that it brought to iTeam, what we think we can bring it as a benefit to our clients. And we are counting with Rob today, the creator itself from SOC CMM, to present it for us. So, Rob, you want to start?
All right. Thank you very much, Joso. Um, and welcome to the webinar on SOC CMM that we are doing together with iTeam. And iTeam has been a support partner of SOC CMM since the very first moment that the support partners were introduced. So I'm very happy that we were able to do this webinar together. So what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about SOC CMM, what it is, the different products that we have, the different services that we have, and also a little bit about the outcomes of the recent SOC report. So let's see, because we did a survey earlier this year, and there's some interesting findings from that. We'll discuss those as well. But let's start out with what SOC CMM started out with. So 9 years ago, SOC CMM was developed as a master's thesis. So it was basically a thesis product that I launched on the internet to see if it was of value to anyone. This was basically an open source capability maturity assessment model. And it wasn't just a model, it was a model assisted by an assessment tool. And that was back in 2016. And this has seen very wide global adoption. So we're seeing usage of SOC CMM throughout the world, basically by security operations centers that are interested in enhancing their security operations, growing to a higher level of maturity and capability. So SOC CMM provides the opportunity to do that, basically by giving you insight into what is basically the strengths and the weaknesses. So what are you doing well and what needs some attention? So a couple of statistics around SOC CMM. We've got over 200 people trained for the certified assessor training, and over 100 people actually also took the examination and did the certification. It's being used across all regions and continents. We've got 22 support partners at the moment in 6 regions and 25 countries. There's 8 SOC certified, and one of those is actually iTeam, and we'll talk about that later on as we go into more detail around what the certification represents, and we can also talk about how the whole certification process works and what the benefits of that are. And there's already a number of SOCs getting ready, preparing to get certified across different regions, also in Brazil. An interesting statistic is that for the last 2 webinars, so that was the webinar on the metrics suite that we launched last year. I'll talk a little bit about that as well. And the recent webinar, in both these webinars, the number 1 attending country was Brazil. So there's definitely a lot of interest within Brazil on SOC CMM. So let's talk a little bit about what it is, because ultimately SOC CMM is a model. It's a simplification of what a security operations center is. And this model uses 5 domains. So we've got business, people, process, technology, and services. I think we can all recognize the people, process, and technology as the standard domains, I would say. On top of that, within SOC CMM, we've added business because we feel like it's very important to have a good alignment with business, adding value to the business from your SOC, and also services. And the difference between processes and services are services are actually the things that you deliver as a security operations center, where processes are the processes running in the background to, for example, for quality assurance within the SOC. So in total, 5 domains and 26 aspects. As you can see here, we've got 2 different colors. So we have the blue color and we have the purple color. The blue color represents the section where we evaluate only maturity within the SOC. The purple color is where we evaluate both maturity as well as capability. And also in the purple side, we get to choose what elements we want to include into our assessment. So not all SOCs have the same set of services. Not all SOCs have the same set of technology. So you can choose the technologies and services that you actually use within the SOC and include those into your assessment. Now, maturity and capability itself is loosely aligned with CMMI. For those who are familiar with CMMI, CMMI has 5 maturity levels and 4 capability levels. Well, the essence of maturity is that we talk about how well it's been a certain process or certain elements have been structured. So we're sort of talking about, is it documented? Is it repeatable? Is it reliable? Is it measured? Is it optimized? All those sorts of things. And at the lower maturity levels, what we see is that security operations is done in a very ad hoc way. So we're very responsive to what happens, and we're very reactive to what happens in a certain situation, and then the outcomes of that are varying, basically. So we don't have a reliable outcome because of the lack of documentation, the lack of procedures, the lack of structure, basically. So that's what we see in lower maturity levels. Where in higher maturity levels, we see that we are delivering measured services. We are delivering continuously optimized services. So we are very well aware of that. We need to have something that is of high quality, and that's all part of being operating the higher maturity level. So the main difference with CMMI is one, for maturity, we have one additional level, which is the level non-existent, which is level 0, which is basically only applicable in a situation where one of the elements from the domain that I just showed you, the model here, one of the elements here is not present in the SOC at all, in no form. Then you have the level non-existent. And what we have in capability is we have 4 levels here, which is also similar to what CMMI offers. The biggest difference, again, is in both maturity and capability. We approach maturity in a continuous way rather than staged. So CMMI is a staged model, which means everything has to operate on a level 2 before you can go to level 2. SOC CMM is a continuous model where we also have these intermittent levels. For example, the outcomes of your assessment might be that some elements are running on a level 2.3, for example, which is perfectly fine in SOC CMM and which is impossible in CMMI. So it's more organic, I would say. The growth is more organic than staged, which I believe is also how we operate and evolve our security operations center. So one question you could ask yourself is, why is SOC maturity important? Or why do we do these assessments? I think on the right-hand side, what you see is from the DEVO SOC report back in 2022, where the question was asked, how important is your organization's SOC to its overall cybersecurity strategy? And what you can see here is that 75% of respondents say it's either essential or at least very important. So I think we all understand that a SOC is very important in a good cybersecurity strategy, because security operations are able to detect and help protect, so they can enhance our resilience against cyber attacks. They can protect our company against these cyber attacks, and when they do occur, they can respond to these attacks in a efficient way to minimize damages. So without a SOC, basically, we would have higher damages. We would have a higher likelihood of being compromised. So that's why the SOC is essential in a cybersecurity strategy. And it used to be okay to just have a SOC. I think if we look back at a couple of years ago, maybe a decade ago, I think the idea of just having a SOC in place was sufficient. and even maybe back then, just having a SIM solution in place, running and doing some sort of automated monitoring was sufficient, because at least we are doing something with logging and monitoring. I think we all realize that the world today, the cyber attackers today, that is not sufficient. We don't just need a security operations center. What we need is a mature and capable security operations center, able to defend against our relevant cyber attackers. So they have evolving capabilities. They become better and better. They become more mature, more capable. We need to match that as defenders to make sure that we can protect our organizations. So that's why maturity is important in Security Operations Center. But how do we then become more mature as a SOC? Well, that requires insight into what we're doing well and what needs improvement. And that is part of what SOC CMM has to offer, basically establishing that level of your current state of maturity, and then taking that insight to drive continuous improvement, to make sure that you are operating continuously, moving towards a higher level of maturity, a higher level of capability. Because if you're not evolving and the attackers do evolve, then you will get left behind. And we do not want that. We want to be in a good position where we can match the capabilities of our attackers. So this is also why the SOC CMM was created. And there's a couple of use cases for SOC CMM. One of those is, and I think that's the main use case, is current state assessment. We take the model, we take each one of those aspects, those elements that I showed you earlier, and we are going to evaluate if what the current state of that specific element is. And then we take all these individual elements and we create the entire picture of how the SOC is operating. And we can see that for all these domains that I mentioned before. So we can see how the SOC is operating the business domain, the people, process, technology, and service domain. So we get the full picture of the current state of maturity and capability within the SOC. We can also use the SOC CMM to do a form of target operating modeling. Now, target operating modeling is a way of looking at the SOC in a more strategic way. So instead of looking at the current state of the SOC and saying how can we improve the current state, target operating modeling, we take a more strategic approach and say this is how we want to operate. This is how we feel like we should be operating. That's your target operating model, and you can define that in terms of these individual elements of SOC CMM. So we can have a look at each of these elements and say, this is how we feel like we should be operating as a SOC. And then we've got a target to move towards. We still need the insight into the current state, and then we can take the current state, look at the target state, see the gap, and then start moving towards that through continuous improvement. We can also use SOC CMM for SOC building and design. Basically, what you saw in the model is all these building blocks. We can take these building blocks and design them individually and create a consistent whole of that to design our SOC, to design the way we want to operate our SOC. We can also use it for compliance reasons. Now, this is not something that's very common yet, but those who are actually certified or preparing to get certified, you would need to get SOC CMM compliant. And SOC CMM compliant against the certification framework means that you have to understand the control framework, you have to understand the process, you have to gather the evidences and that sort of thing. So compliance is another use case that you can use SOC CMM for. And finally, it's design validation. SOC CMM has a number of questions around, for example, the services that you're including into the SOC, the technologies that you're using for the SOC, the way the team is structured. So we're talking team structure here, we're talking roles that we've chosen within the SOC. There's all kinds of design decisions there, and we can perform design validation using SOC CMM. So when we're asking these questions, we are not just looking at the current state and saying, okay, this is how we do it, but we can use those same questions to say, is this still the right way to do it? Because it might have made a lot of sense when we designed it, but that could have been a couple of years ago, and some things don't make a lot of sense anymore. So we need to regularly reevaluate design choices made when deploying the Security Operations Center. I want to talk a little bit about SOC CMM products. So there's a couple of products that I want to talk to you about. So we've got the assessment tools, we've got the ebook, we've got the metrics suite, and we've got the maturity report, which is the maturity report is that was released earlier this week. So that's very recent. The assessment tools have been around for a while, although there was a new assessment tool introduced not long ago. So I'm going to talk about the assessment tools here, and I'm going to talk mainly about the basic and advanced assessment tool. So this is the SOC CMM assessment tool as it was designed 9 years ago, but of course made better over the years, improved over the years. I think the tool itself has matured over the years. So there's two versions of it. We've got a basic version and we've got an advanced version that are actually completely similar, with one exception. The advanced version has one feature the basic version does not have, which is the option to apply importance to a single question. So we've got all the questions in SOC CMM that you need to answer. You can apply importance to those. That's not an option that you have in the basic version, only in the advanced version. Ultimately, they're very much alike. So what you get is a number of questions you need to go through and ask yourself, and then you need to score those on a 5-point scale. So it's either no, or it could be partially, mostly, fully, averagely, that kind of those kind of answers. And there's embedded guidance in the tool. So once you select an answer, the tool will provide you with some automated guidance for that level. So if I select partially, for example, I get a different bit of guidance than I would say averagely. So this will help you to determine the right answer to these questions. And once you've finished all the questions, in this case, what you're seeing on the right-hand side is the output from the tool. It's an Excel tool that you can download for free. It's a little bit of modified Excel, but it has the basic. It only uses the basic functionalities of Excel. So there's no active content or anything. So what you're seeing here on the right-hand side is the results page. So once you've finished all the questions, gone through all of the questions, what you get is the results. And as I was saying earlier on, because it's continuous, you can get scores like 2.3, or in this case for the business domain, a 3.02 score for the business domain, which is slightly above the maturity target in this case that we set to 3. This is also a functionality of the tool. We can think about what maturity level we want to operate at. That's our maturity target. We can do the same for capability, but of course, as explained earlier on, capability only applies to the technology and services domain. We can scope out certain services. As you can see, vulnerability management and log management here are both scoped out from the services domain. For the rest, we've got all the technologies and all the other services in scope of our assessment. So this is basically the assessment tool that is very popular and being used a lot by SOC teams, because it was designed to do self-assessment. And we'll talk a little bit about the limitations of self-assessment later on, but it was designed to be a self-assessment tool that works very well for that. We've also got a screening tool, which does not give you maturity scores. So that's a tool that you would use for quick scan purposes, just to get acquainted with the SOC CMM model, but it doesn't provide any maturity scores itself. Besides the assessment tools, we've got a couple of others that I'd like to go through. So that's the metrics suite is one of those. What it does basically is provide a baseline for performance measurement in the Security Operations Center. So there's 101 metrics in total. And there's all kinds of metrics across all domains. As you can see, there's only 4 metrics in the business domain, only 4 in the technology domain, and most metrics are in the services and process domains, which I think is logical, because ultimately, when we are using metrics, the thing that we are most interested in is how we're performing and in terms of service quality. So I think it's logical to have the most metrics in that area. So we do performance measurement across all domains, and we are defining 3 different implementation levels: L1, L2, and L3. Now, those implementation levels basically represent the different complexity levels of implementing a certain metric. So L1 is the sort of the basic metrics that you should have in place. Now, L2 on top of that are more complex to put into place, more time consuming, and sometimes rely on the availability of the L1 metric. And L3 are even the more complex ones, usually because the type of data to actually to implement that metric is more difficult to obtain. The metric suite also has some target value suggestions and some group by suggestions. And let me just show you in the next 2 slides a few examples of those metrics. Again, this is a free product from SalkCMM. You can just download the PDF. It explains the setup of the metric suite. It also explains the different levels and some best practices when you're operationalizing your metrics program internally. So a couple of examples here. You're seeing different types of metrics on the left-hand side. The first one is a number. The second one is a percentage. The third one is a timing metric, but it also indicates a trend. This is what we have, the different types of metrics. And then we've got different levels, as you can see. So in this case, the number of high priority gaps in knowledge matrix, that's an L1 metric. It does require something called a knowledge matrix within the SOC. If you are familiar with SalkCMM, this is part of knowledge management aspect in the people domain. This is one of the things that every SOC should have at some level, just the insight into who knows what within the SOC, so that if some person leaves the SOC, we don't have an enormous gap in knowledge with that person leaving. We can also have certain targets. For example, the percentage of use case reviewed should be about 10% per month, so that we can review all the use cases on a yearly basis. We can also do differentiation. So the percentage of tickets reviewed, for example, here, which is an L2 metric, is to do with quality assurance. We are basically saying for high priority tickets, we would need to review 30% of those. For medium priority tickets, 15%, and low priority tickets, 5%. Why? Because we're expecting the quantities of low to be higher than medium and high, and also, of course, the importance is lower. So we would need to have a smaller set. Some more example metrics here. An interesting one to me is, for example, mean time to analyze. So what we're seeing here is an L2 metric that says the time to start and complete the alert analysis. Now we can make some differentiation here. We can do that per analyst, which gives us the option to start measuring analyst performance. We would need to combine performance, as in the time taken to do the analysis, with the quality of that analysis, and we can create this a bit of performance insight into the analysts, and we can look at the different analysts and look at the different performances and connect some analysts together so that they can learn from each other and improve their performance together. Another way to differentiate is per use case. Not every use case, not every alert takes the same amount of time. So if we average that out, there might be a couple of alerts. There will be a couple of alerts that take longer to analyze than others. Question is, why is that the case? And very often, the reason for that is because there's a number of manual things that need to be checked. So there's lack of context, basically, for the alert. And this is the kind of thing where we can say, this is a candidate for automation. So if there's a lot of manual activity, it will take longer to analyze. Thus, if we take those use cases and we start automating those, we can definitely improve the performance of the SOC altogether. So this is the type of metrics that you will find in the metrics suite. All these different metrics at the different levels. I also want to talk a little bit about the maturity report outcomes. I've got 3 slides for this. The report discusses a lot of things about maturity. It also talks a lot about the way SOC services are addressing some of their challenges. And finally, the report also talks about the certification program, the next steps in SOC CMM development. So I would definitely recommend to look at that report. Again, a free resource recently published. So there's a couple of challenges that we see when increasing and assessing SOC maturity. And as you can see, lack of time is one of the major things. So the improvement challenges we see, lack of time is the #1 challenge. When maturity assessment challenge, again, insufficient time is the #1 challenge. There's a couple of things that we can do about that, of course. The main thing is we can use the support partners. So those are external parties that provide assessment services, such as IT. And these support partners can help you tackle that insufficient time, and also if you do not have the necessary expertise available to perform these assessments, because of course the support partners are verified partners that do have that expertise. And as we can see also here, maturity progresses over time, and this is a trend line with some exceptions here. And the exceptions are mainly due to the data points. So in some cases we don't have a lot of data points, so you get a little bit of changes in the graph. But ultimately, the orange line is the trend line, which is clearly going up. So what we see in general is that new SOCs have a low maturity level, and we can see over time that we are slowly growing. So it's usually very common for a SOC to get to almost level 2 fairly quickly, where it's somewhat structured. But then getting to that level 3 is a lot harder, and getting to even a higher level than 3 is even much higher. So initial maturity increase is rapid, and then a later maturity increase is more gradual. And this does not happen automatically. It's something that should be understood very well. Maturity does not happen automatically. You have to make a conscious choice to increase maturity in the SOC, which requires effort, and it requires insight, and it requires direction in terms of continuous improvement. So that's again where SOC CMM can provide the insight and provide the direction for the SOC to take to grow your maturity. It does not happen automatically. There's also a couple of regional differences I'd like to talk about that we see from the report. So what we can see here is that, for example, North America and Europe, Middle East are the highest scoring regions according to the third-party assessments that we are conducting. And we are basically from SOC CMM, all the support partners from all the regions, they provide them their assessment outcomes, and this is the basis for the report. But we're combining that as well with the survey data. And when we look at self-assessment, we get a very different picture. So if we look at self-assessment, it is a much more, you see Middle East and North America as the lowest scoring instead of almost the highest scoring. So that's an interesting change, basically. Part of this is because when you're doing self-assessments, it's very easy to overestimate your own maturity, which is also a reason why the support partner network was put into place, because it adds objectiveness to your measurements, to get a very accurate picture of how your SOC is operating in terms of maturity. Overestimating your own maturity through self-assessment is a very common thing. I also want to talk a little bit about SOC CMM certification. So the certification program was actually launched last year, the end of October. What I see in many cases is where a first step in usage of SOC CMM is performing self-assessment, which of course is good practice to assess yourself within the SOC. But as you saw just now, there's some limitations to self-assessment, overestimation of maturity and lack of objectivity, which is inherent in self-assessment because you're doing it yourself. So that's why a third-party assessment, for example, provides you with a higher level of objectivity and a higher level of assurance as well. The highest level of assurance actually comes from certification, which has a different purpose. So ultimately, when we talk about assessment, this is about understanding our current maturity level and improving our current maturity level. When we talk about certification, it's not so much about improving our maturity levels. It is being compliant to what SOC CMM dictates as a baseline. And there's 3 levels of those baseline. We'll talk about that in the next slide. So we've got 3 levels of that. But when we do an assessment, we get to say, okay, do I have this in place? Well, I have it partially in place. In a certification, you either have it in place, which is you're compliant, or you don't. In that case, you're non-compliant, and something you need to resolve before getting certified. So it's a different approach, a different purpose. And the objective for certification basically were to provide that fully objective way to assess SOC capabilities. When you're doing an assessment, you can have a discussion on whether it should be partially or averagely or mostly. When it comes to getting certified, we need a more objective way to do that. So instead of asking questions, a control framework was put into place, and that control framework was entirely based on the assessment questions. But instead of asking the question, we just put in the control. We're just going to say, this is what you need to have. You need to have this as a SOC, and this is what it should look like. So it's more prescriptive, basically. And the objective here is also not just to provide that fully objective way to assess your capabilities, but also from the SOC perspective itself is to demonstrate quality of SOC service delivery. So we can have this as a mark of quality. If we pass this mark of quality at those 3 levels, this says something about how well our services are developed, if they're mature and if they're capable. And for MSSP clients, it's important to have that that sort of trust in the MSSP, that if they use the MSSP services, then they can trust in the fact that those are mature services, those are capable services, and not just because they say so, but because an external third party has done a formal assessment, formal audit actually, a formal audit of their services, and has indicated that indeed they have the right level of maturity and capability. So the certification itself is aimed at MSSPs, want to demonstrate quality of SOC service delivery to clients, to prospects, in-house SOCs, want to demonstrate their quality of services to, for example, board of directors or supervisors, or any SOC that has to comply to regulations, which is not yet the case, but it's in the Middle East, for example, this is something that's emerging, where there's regulations around this type of certification. So let's talk a little bit about the level. So we've got the defined level, the validated and risk-driven level. Defines the first level, of course, then you see validated second level, and then risk-driven as the third level. A defined SOC could be described best, I would say, as a reliable as a SOC with reliable, repeatable service delivery. So things are documented, things are matured, and we can rely on the fact that the service delivery is of sufficient quality. Now, the validated level, what we're adding on top of that is measurement, quality assurance. We're also adding validation of correctness, so through exercises, through red teaming, through detection testing, and other types of activity, so that we make sure that the SOC is not just reliable in terms of processes, but we can actually trust the outcomes, and we can trust that the rules in the SOC work correctly. And finally, at a risk-driven level, beyond that, we have a very central position for threat intelligence and for risks. So we have a SOC that is able to understand customer risks, is able to take the critical assets of the customers into, and I'm talking customers here. It can also be an in-house SOC, and then your customers, would you be your internal customers? I'm using the term customers because that's also what SOC CMM calls it in the model. So understanding risks, understanding critical assets, tying threat intelligence to threat hunting, tying threat intelligence to development of new detection rules, tying threat intelligence to prioritizing techniques in the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So all of those things. So when it comes to how that relates to maturity levels, because we talked about maturity levels earlier on, defined is at least level 3, because level 3 says we need to have things documented and demonstrated. So this gives us a good level of demonstrability. Validated, it's more like going into level 4, not for all aspects, but for most aspects we would need to go into level 4, especially around services, because we are adding quality assurance and measurement to the mix. And finally, risk driven, it's not so much a higher maturity level, but it's a more capable and integrated way of working around risks and threat intelligence. Now, ITEAM, for example, is a SOC that is certified at the risk-driven level. There's a large number of controls. What I want to show here is just the fact that this is an extensive control framework. There's 127 controls in total, which is quite a high number of controls. But this is also because SOC CMM is about the details. We don't want to look at, if we look at, for example, monitoring from an ISO 27K perspective, that's very high level. We just need to have some monitoring and logging in place. This is about the details of how we actually do it, how we apply MITRE ATT&CK framework, how we develop our detection rules, how we validate those detection rules, how we run our security monitoring, what procedures we have there, what environments are we monitoring, are we able to see everything across the entire attack chain? All of those details matter, which is why there's a quite large number of controls, given this relatively small scope of just the Security Operations Center. So it's a very rigorous process. These are some of the outcomes again from the survey, and these can be found in the report again. So in the survey, we saw that most are familiar with the certification program, most respondents, and the most common reason for getting certified is demonstrating the service quality to either board of directors, your clients, prospects, and or regulators. So I think it's aligned with the objectives of the certification. And a lot of the respondents actually indicate they want to get their SOC certified as soon as possible, and at least a validated level. As you can see, almost half indicate that the validated level would be the right one. If you go to certification.soccmm.com, there is actually a recently released white paper, certification white paper, that is a summary basically of the certification program. I just want to talk a little bit more about the support partners. The idea behind the support partners is, and this was back in 2023 when we launched that network, is basically to have localized support for SOC CMM in the native language, in the native culture, localized and nearby. So I think it's important to have organizations you can go to if you have questions about SOC CMM, if you want to get prepared for SOC CMM certification, if you would like to have an assessment, a third-party assessment of someone else to provide a more objective view of your SOC, that needs to be available. And this is why the Support Partner Network was initiated. We also work together within the Support Partner Network on new resources, such as the metric suite, such as the report. So you can, if you read the report, all the partners provide their insights into SOC trends as well. Other types of publications where we work together. So all of that are the objectives for support partnerships, where we collaborate and co-create new versions of the SOC CMM. There's two levels actually. We've got silver support, we've got gold support levels. Both have requirements around training and verified references, so that we can ensure we have consistent quality and trustworthy partners in the partner network. So the added value here is they're trained, they're validated, they have demonstrable experience. I think that's an important thing. So we can, when we go and use a support partner, there's a level of trust in that. They provide that external view, more objective. They bring the SOC CMM expertise. They have the detailed information and benchmarking. Some of that information is available, as you saw in the report, but the support partners have access to higher levels of detail. And they can assist in improving the current state, even defining a target state if that's what you're interested in a strategic direction for your SOC, defining that target state. That's the sort of stuff where the support partners can come in and help you. There's also, and that's the last service that we provide. So we provide the certification service, we provide the support service. Through the support partners, we also provide training services. So we've got 2 trainings for SOC CMM. One is the certified assessor training, one is the lead auditor training. The certified assessor training is all about assessment. You will learn about how to perform SOC CMM assessments and deal with the outcomes, do the analysis, create the report, create an improvement roadmap, and also the creation of a target operating model for strategic direction. So we talked about that earlier on. One of the use cases of SOC CMM is creation of that strategic target operating model, and this course talks about that as well. Besides the certified assessor training, we've also got the lead auditor training. That one is mostly focused on the certification process. The whole understanding of certification scheme, the interpretation of certification controls, and everything that's required around proper preparation for getting your SOC certified. So those are the 2 trainings that are being delivered for SOC CMM. There's actually one upcoming training in June. So the registration deadline for that one is very shortly. It's in 10 days from now, so May 26th. We've got trainings across different time zones. So the one closest to Brazil is actually the US Eastern. I think it's probably the same time. It's 8 to 12 in the morning. If you're interested in that, it's all delivered online. It's all delivered through Zoom. So if you're interested in participating, then you can register via the link below, the services/training link on the SOC CMM website. So a couple of key takeaways here. The key takeaways for strategic operations centers for today. I believe it's essential for SOCs to increase your maturity and capability, to keep up with the evolving threat landscape, because our attackers, our adversaries are also evolving. They are continuously improving the way they work, making it more effective, making it more efficient, exchanging capabilities, exchanging tools. If we don't do anything as a SOC, then we will lose that race. So we need to have investment in maturity and capability. We need to make sure that we're continuously growing out and maturing our SOC. We can use the SOC CMM assessment tool for that purpose. If you want to get a very first view of SOC CMM, you've never done anything with it before, and the complete tool is very daunting, you could go for a quick scan using the screening tooling. But I think the full assessment tool is the best way to evaluate your SOC. You can get a very detailed insight into the current state of maturity of the SOC. If you're unable to do it yourself due to time restrictions or due to experience, that you don't have the right experience, the right expertise to do it, or you've done it before as a self-assessment and you want to get a more objective view of your SOC, then engaging with a support partner is a very good idea, because that increases the objectivity, increases the quality, and also the value of assessments, because it's the additional what the support partners of course bring to the table is their experience with other clients, and their general experience with security operations. So it definitely increases the value of your assessment outcomes, and can also help you to define and execute an improvement roadmap. And finally, if you're looking for that highest level of assurance, then certification is a good way to demonstrate your SOC service quality, which is of course a very rigorous process with very rigorous audit processes attached to that. So it does take a lot of preparation to get through that, but there's also definitely some added value to it. Of course, getting certified, being able to demonstrate that to your board of directors or your clients or prospects is very valuable. But also the whole process of getting certified means that you have to rethink how you deploy and mature your security operations, which I think is a very good idea to do, because that's the essence of what SOC CMM is trying to do, is improving security operations globally, and everything here from the services to the products is supporting that mission. All right, so let me ask you, Dirzo. I was just talking about the certification process and the performance of SOC CMM assessments. You've been doing these SOC CMM assessment within ITM for quite a while, and you've also obtained the highest level of certification for your SOC. So can you tell me a little bit? Can you share with the audience what the added value has been of using SOC CMM to ITM?
Yeah. Well, we chose to follow with the SOC CMM for some reasons that are being well met up to this day. The first one, I think, every security officer has the challenge to prove the efficiency of its operation to the body. So it was something that I was looking for. How can we show that our SOC today is mature and the money that we invest in it is bringing more benefits to our customers over the time, right? So that's something important for us to show and to prove to our board. And the maturity that we build with the SOC CMM, the levels that we were growing inside the framework is something that helps me to do it. So, and yes, we have been doing it for a very long time. At the time, I asked our security manager at the time to find a framework for SOCs that we could use to prove these results. At the time, it was Daniel Sattler that made it with us. And at the time, the SOC CMM framework was your master thesis only. And a few years later, we knew that it would become a certification. And that's why we went after started the pilot to get the certified with it. And that was the main reason that we follow with the SOC CMM. But over the years, right, that we have been working with it, there was one slide that you showed the controls, the 127 controls that you have on your framework. And when you say that the details that you ask on these controls are the most important part, I agree with you, because it's something that it is useful for us not only to prove what we are doing, but we had some, for example, we had some issues in our detection engineer process, and we were not very sure on how to solve those issues, what were the best practices. And when we were studying it and correlation with the SOC CMM, we found the answers on how to solve it, how to get it in line with the best practice that we could be doing. And that's why we implement the SOC CMM. That's why we keep up with it, because I think we can show and audit our process. We use SOC CMM not only as a tool to prove to our board the efficiency of our SOC, but also a guideline on how to implement the process on the right way.
Right.
Those are the key benefits that we see from implement SOC CMM as a whole. But beyond this, Rob, we have some questions in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna read them so we can answer them together. First one is from Marinho. He's asking, how can the SOC CMM help to align and integrate red team and adversary emulation activities with SOC operations and maturity?
Right. So red teaming is actually not part of the services within SOC CMM. So I think the only thing that we really see this is in the section of detection validation. So there's a section in SOC CMM in the process domain called detection engineering and validation. And this is where we align detection engineering effort, creation of new detection rules with threat intelligence. But this is also where we perform adversary emulation. We perform validation of detection capabilities. I think red teaming is also something that comes back in the process domain in the element called operations and facilities, where we talk about exercises. One of those exercises, of course, is a red team exercise, and how we use the outcomes from those exercises to continuously improve our security operations. So it's not covered as a service, but elements of red teaming and adversarial emulation are embedded into the SOC CMM model.
Yeah, those are the phases that we use it. The SOC and the adversarial emulation inside ITAM SOCs. We have it integrated to the life cycle of our detection engineering team, because we have different layers of tests inside ITAM. One of them is the unit test for the detection that we developed. So we make the simple tests possible to understand if it's detecting what we want. After this, we have a integration test to understand in a larger attack how would that detection behave in our environment. Because when we are doing the unit one, we are trying that TTP itself to understand. But when we are conducting a penetration test itself, we use a lot of different TTPs, and we like to see how the detection behavior works in this case. That's how we are doing it. And apart from that, we have regular tests that are more that have a little bit more time frame between them. That is a not guided one, and that's how the adversarial emulation can help us. And something that I think that showed up on your report that is, I think that is important. As you said, the best tools, they are not yet required for a SOC, but we are all moving in this direction of have a breach attack simulation. We have some routines here that we try to test our rules automatically, but the idea is to move to a real implemented breach attack simulation tool that I think it's very important to contribute with this aspect of adversarial emulation inside a SOC environment.
Agreed, because it helps you to scale up your emulation efforts, basically. So we can do things at a much larger scale than we'd be able to do manually.
Yes. The next question is, what are the current trending AI implementations in SOC operations, and what are your expectations regarding this topic? So what are you seeing in the environment of AI implementations now, and what do you think it's going to become in the future?
Right. So that's actually there was a question in the survey as well. So it's part of the report. Some of the usages of AI within the SOC, and as we see it at the moment, it's still in a very early stage. If you look at how Gartner shows AI in the hype cycle, it's still very much in the hype phase. Although some types of AI have sort of passed the peak of those inflated expectations and are starting to move further along the maturity cycle. We're seeing SOCs adopting it, but it's still rather limited. So what I expect for many SOCs is, if you look at what's out there, there's a lot of point solutions. So I can use an LLM to support in detection engineering, and I can use an LLM to support in threat intelligence and all kinds of things. But what we're seeing mostly is that I think that the added value comes from integrated AIs into existing tooling. I think that's where most SOCs will start dealing with AIs, because of the fact that otherwise you will have to do your own research into into what will be the best AI tools to use and under what circumstances, which requires time investment and a lot of knowledge. So I think most SOCs will be introduced into AI in the existing tooling, which is already happening with the co-pilots and that sort of thing. And we'll see more and more SOCs adopting it. Ultimately, the question is, what will that do to the analyst job? Will the machine take over the analyst job? I think it will make the analyst job easier. We'll still need the analyst. I think we'll still need the human decision factor, not for everything, but for the more important use cases, definitely. So we can start focusing on the more important things and leave the less important things to the machine.
Yes. Something that we developed here in iTeam a while ago. We have a mobile app, so you can see how the status of your environment is right now. And the first thing that we made is to add the AI to help understand your questions in a natural language. So how many alerts of high criticity I have in my environment being investigated, and this AI would give the answers to the analyst. So you have a photograph of what's happening on your environment. So I think those quick tweaks that we can do with AI to understand what's happening is something that contributes a lot and takes the complexity away of some things that we would have to take time of a senior analyst to give you a simple answer, as how many incidents I have going on in my SOC. So the AI will be very helpful for those use cases. And I think we have to invest on this. I think instead of trying to invent something that's very complicated, we can rely on AI to do the things that take us more time, right? This question was from Gabriel. I have another one from João Sena. He said he read the SOC CMM report and found interesting that when you talk about maturity levels, you found out that the SOCs that are the MSSPs, they have the highest maturity in SOC CMM reports, even bigger than nation states or insider SOCs. And he asked, how do you see it and the reason behind it?
What we see with MSSPs is they need to match their maturity to the highest expecting customer. In some cases, the customers will not be very mature themselves. So which means that you can get away with low maturity security operations. But if you have a larger amount of customers, and some of those will have very high expectations towards your maturity, which also means that as a SOC, as a SOC provider, you would need to deliver a lot of mature services, because you need to match the expectations of all your clients, not just the immature ones, but also the ones that have very high expectations towards your SOC. So this is why the MSSPs require a higher maturity level to be able to adequately service all of the clients.
Yes, you are right. We have the pressure of different stakeholders, right? Different companies, and we have to be on top of everything. So that's something that pulls us to be better all the time. Another question here from Wei. Today, threat modeling isn't a part of SOC CMM. How can threat modeling team improve the maturity in the process, and if there is any intention to add this as a discipline for the SOC CMM framework at all?
Right. So this has been a matter of discussion for a longer period now. So some of the support partners feel like threat modeling should be in the SOC CMM model. Others don't feel the same way. So it's a point of discussion. If you look at the survey again, this was one of the questions. So what do the organizations do in terms of threat modeling? And you will see that it's mostly around selection of the most appropriate attack techniques, so the MITRE ATT&CK techniques. If you look at all the other types of threat modeling, or even usage of a complete threat modeling methodology, that's rather limited. So there aren't too many SOCs out there who do threat modeling in a mature way. So what we intend to do instead, because I think as a best practice, threat modeling is not yet a best practice within security operations centers. But what SOC CMM intends to do is create a library of best practices for security operations. So that library of best practices will address a number of topics. One of those topics will be threat modeling. So how do you perform threat modeling within a security operations center, and how to do that in a mature way? So we'll use these best practices, these shorter documents, to give some guidance on how to mature your threat modeling capabilities.
Yeah. So the idea is not to bring it as a point to be accessed in the SOC CMM certification, but to give the guideline on how to do it on the correct way, right?
Right. Yeah. And it might be part of the assessment tool. It might be part of the certification tool at some point in the future, but it would need to be a more established practice within security operations centers before that would happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the one of the points, right, of the SOC CMM is to give this maturity level. Doesn't matter on which points, and with those idea and quick drops, quick tests, as you said, it would be nice. Well, the last question, so we do not get too much over our time here, is how does the framework evaluate the integration between incident response and the vulnerability management process?
Right. That's a good question. So I would say the integration there is addressed a little bit in the process domain, in the section operations and facilities, because that's where we talk about process integration. But for each of the services, there's also a question that says how well it's integrated with existing other processes. And this is sort of a question that is not very prescriptive. So you can interpret that one in the most appropriate way for your organization. In this case, you're specifically concerned about the integration between incident response and vulnerability management. So that question would need to be interpreted against that specific integration. We evaluate incident management separately. We evaluate vulnerability management separately, and there are a number of questions where we can tie them together, basically.
Yes. Something that I have been seeing that's happening in the market with the CTEM, the continuous threat exposure management, is something that they are asking that this integration works better, right? Because when we are looking to CTEM, they say about the first part that to know how to prioritize your vulnerabilities for the correction and generate those findings as a process for the incident response team to work faster. Because if
Right.
you are showing as your exposure, that itself it's that itself is an incident per se. So the idea is to make it run faster, quicker, and to be more effective when dealing with the vulnerabilities corrections, right?
Right, correct.
Yeah. So, well, Rob, that was our time. I would like to thank you to taking the time to participate with us. It was great. And well, for me, I learned a lot about how to deal where we are going with the report, and the SOC CMM was and still is very important for our operation and for those guidelines. So thank you. And
Thank you
that's
as
it.
well. It was great
Well,
to be able to do this finally with one of the support partners, and of course, iTeam has always been I would say, flag bearer of SOC CMM within Brazil. So very happy to do this together with you.
yeah. Well, thank you. We're talking a bit, guys. Thank you everyone that participate. We hope to hear from you. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye bye.